First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
Web mixed martial arts fans, welcome back to another edition of the Eternal MMA Insiders Podcast, fresh for 2023. As always, my name's Luke. I'm your host and joined again today by another very special guest for the first time. It's Ben Vickers, the man at the helm of Eternal MMA, one of the men at the helm, also the head coach of Scrappy MMA. Ben, thanks for joining me today, man. How you doing?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for having me, Luke. And it's nice to finally talk to you. I thought I should have been first, mate, but you went around the houses first. Now you've got to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is actually our formal introduction. What have I been doing work with Eternal for a little bit over a year now? So this is our first face-to-face. We've had a little bit of a chat on the socials and everything, but this is the first time we're actually seeing each other and having a bit of a yarn.
Yeah, I saw you at the last Eternal, but I was in such a bad mood that I just thought, I'm not going to go and introduce myself to someone today. They'll think I'm a right arsehole. So I just exited the building. I
think everyone can see that you were sort of fairly busy, sort of in and out. It's funny because my mate who I was with was like, hey, who's that guy sort of coming in and out? Oh, it's Ben, he's very busy. So, and then he noticed a Superman change of clothes at some point during the show when you swapped into the corner. So it's understandable. You're on the go that day.
Yeah, it's crazy sometimes, these fight shows. I'd love to be able to sit back at Eternal, especially the one that just went by and just enjoy it, because it was from what I've heard, it was pretty epic. I was just running around and then left. So I didn't really stay till the end. Terrible behaviour, I know. But yeah, I'd love to sit back one day in the crowd and just enjoy a nice ice cold soft drink and watch the action and watch the world go by at Eternal. But it's not to be for a while.
Have you ever got to do that? Like, obviously, you've pretty much been running the show from the start, but have you ever got to just sort of sit back and actually go? Or?
Nah, not really. No.
You're always sort of there in someone's corner, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Or there's something to do, you know.
Of course.
There's always something to do. You wouldn't believe it. It looks like such a smooth ship on the surface. I don't even know if it does. But yeah, behind the scenes, it's pretty hectic at all times.
I mean, from an outsider's perspective, man, it looked like, everything was running pretty smooth. I got the grand tour at the back. Cam came and got me sort of mid-show and took me out the back, and everything looked like it was, sort of spinning a lot of plates and everything. But well-run show. That was actually my first show I've been to outside of the UFC. So I was blown away. It was incredible. 2,500 people, I think we had there in attendance. It was a record, I think it was. Yeah,
it's probably a record since Danny Green fought there. I don't think any martial arts show in Perth has sold tickets like that. Definitely not at that stadium anyway. So yeah, it was pretty epic to do that and to see the support and to hear the noise. I mean, this is such a cool venue. Like, it's really well set up for MMA. So to hear, and the crowd in Perth is great, as we found out at the UFC too. They get really into it. They're loud. They're vocal. Yeah, it's a good time, and it was great to finally sort of feel that place. It's been a goal of mine, so to check that one off at home on such a massive weekend was pretty special.
It was a huge weekend. I mean, everyone I've sort of spoken to on the show recently we've had on and just sort of touched on, like, what it sort of means, I guess, for Australian mixed martial arts and whole to have that event, sort of on that night, and then to have the UFC the next day, especially with having Jack and everything fighting. And then, of course, we get Steven, getting his UFC contract off the back of Eternal 73 as well.
Yeah.
I said it was my first event. I was blown away. Like, I mean, I didn't really sort of know what to expect. We came from sort of about 15 minutes into the city outside of the stadium. And I said to the bloke that was with me, I said, "Oh, we'll train a limb. We'll get there at the start of the prelims. Like, it shouldn't be too crazy." We sort of wandered in, and I pulling up in the Uber, and I said, "Oh, there's a bit of a line already forming outside." And we get there, and we're like, "Oh my God!" There's like the whole line was like wrapped around the building. I didn't know what to expect, but like you sort of realize, like, even straight away, like from the very first prelims, like everyone's good to go. Is that strictly a Perth thing? Do you find that in the events you go to in the Gold Coast, does that happen as well, or is it sort of the same everywhere, or is it different? Sort of, do you find?
I think everyone's good, like, tries to get there early. Like, I think that what I pride myself most on at Eternal is the fights we match, and the matches we make. I think that's always what Eternal has been about. So, so yeah. Hang on one second.
You got a guess.
I'm just in the middle of something, son. Oh yes, they are. Yeah.
Was that your boy?
That is my son. Yes, he doesn't care about podcasts or anything like that. He just needed to know whose glasses these were.
Of course, yeah, very important stuff.
No, he knows now. Corey, where were we before we were so rudely interrupted?
Talking about the crowd, that was obviously I mentioned the crowd and what it was sort of like for me coming to that Perth show for the first time, but just sort of gauging your feel as that's sort of the same everywhere, like whether you go to the Gold Coast or Brisbane, like is everyone rocking up? Like first thing, do we see that much?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We always get cues, you know, it's nice. I like it was good. I was in the back and people who had come in, because obviously I'd been there for a while. We get in there early and we're setting things up and stuff. So we don't really see what you guys see coming in. Like I've never walked in through the queue. I should do it one day and get the experience like the punter gets. But there's always a bit too much to do. But people started coming back and going, "Oh, have you seen the queue?" You know, it's wrapped right around the building, like you said, and it's brilliant because such a big venue. We've never had that before because they're so efficient at getting people through the doors. But it just goes to show the size of the crowd that day. Yeah, it was brilliant. And like I was saying, Eternal, like we make good fights from the get-go, from the start to the finish. So people know to come early. You don't want to miss an Eternal fight.
No, and I mean, I hope to get back to many more, but I mean, even just sort of touching on that line from, you know, what we had sort of wrapping around the outside of the stadium, and anyone that sort of that's watching this will attest to that. I mean, standing outside in the sun, that was one thing, but there was also that second queue. Funnily for me, because I had the cage side tickets, I joined the original line, and then someone came out and said, "Oh, has anyone got the cage side tickets via VIP?" Yeah, they got the cage side tickets. Like, going around to a line to get in a bit quicker. But I mean, even when you get to that VIP line, a huge line for that as well. Like it was just, obviously we had the 2,500 plus crowd, but it was just jam packed from like both entrances, like from the standard general, even to the VIPs. Like, you know, everyone was grabbing whatever tickets they could, I guess.
Yeah, and I've always been really, I mean, it's a shame that it was like that because I've always been really conscious of the VIP experience, and for those that pay more for their tickets, I really do feel like you should be rewarded with expedited entry into the venue and
but even
easier seating, and so it's always been, it's nice to know that someone found you and put you in the right queue, even though there was a bit of a queue still. It's good to know those systems are working and stuff like that for us, like spotters in the background who love these events. And there's so many little like moving parts that you probably wouldn't think about. That it's actually really cool for me to hear the feedback of someone who like, you're going through the whole process, which is feedback I don't often get. So
no, I mean, 100%. Yeah, cool. And like I said, I mean, there was a line for the VIP side of things, much shorter than what it was for the general admission. But yeah, to your point, it was so well done. And to have those people coming out and clearly explaining, like, you know, what you're sort of supposed to be doing, depending on where you are. That doesn't happen everywhere. Like even sometimes, like you go to the UFC, even something as simple as like finding like your seat and that sort of thing. And not everyone knows. I know it's a bigger scale, but even from the moment you sort of get into the venue at the HBF Stadium and people sort of directing where you sort of need to go and the seating layout and everything, like top notch. Like, you know, for me personally, you know, no bias, like 10 out of 10. I spoke to so many people after you. It was an incredible experience. And I, as you said, you don't sort of get to see it from that perspective because you're just sort of so go. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely blown away. And to sit cage side and see everything there and the lights in the cage, the production and everything, like top notch. Like what's it sort of like for you? Like, you know, coming in, obviously you're sort of sitting cage side originally with the button up shirt, the pants and everything. Then we see you coming out as a coach. Like what's that sort of transition like for you to have to, you know, sort of switch gears like that sort of mid card?
It's just something I've grown used to over the years. Like I've always been doing it. I've got such a good team now with like Ryan Gray, Josh Della, all the boys backstage, Jack Becker. You know, I've got so much experience back there that it's got way easier because I don't really need to be there all the time. But the biggest burden is mentally, you know, like trying to think about the fighters and trying to think about the show. And I always do feel like I'm never fully committed to the boys, which is where I should be, wearing both hats. So that's probably the biggest struggle for me. But I do my best. You know, I get from one spot to the next and I try and do everything to the best of my ability always. Sometimes it doesn't hit those the targets I'd set for myself, but I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say I do my best every time to do each role as well as I can. Sometimes it's easier than others.
I'll tell you what, I'd never seen Josh, I don't think, before, unless I might have seen him on TV at one point, but I saw him come out and I looked and that's Jack's brother. Like, I was like, that's got to be Jack.
Josh. Yeah. Josh gets called Jack all the time.
Is that something that's like developed just since he's been?
You know what? Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. At the Wednesday before the Eternal, we did a stand-up comedy show at the gym, and Jack was in the crowd, but Josh was there and he was having a beer. And the amount of people that sort of did double takes that thought Jack was having a drink, you could see it on people's faces. Like, that's a bit strange. He's standing over there having a beer on fight week. He must be confident, you know. Okay. And then they realised it was Josh. So yeah, poor Josh cops it.
So that was only a week out from the actual UFC event. You say
that was the Wednesday. Yeah.
Oh, like that week. Yes, yeah. Would have been definitely doing a double take, seeing him have a beer and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Josh cops it.
What's the dynamic like with those guys? Like, I mean, they seem like they're pretty close just on a couple of the videos I've seen, but I mean, what's that sort of like from them? What do you see firsthand, being their coach?
Well, they're brothers, and, you know, they couldn't be closer. And Josh is first person in to do rounds. He's there to support Jack and help Jack make his way through this sport. And they're undivided. Like they're just Team Della, and it's so obvious and it's so apparent, and they don't always need to scream or shout it from the rooftops, but yeah, they're in constant support of one another, and Jack couldn't have a better training partner than Josh. So I think he's very lucky in that regard to have a big brother like Josh. But they get on great, and there's never dramas, and there's never, you know, they spar hard, but there's never an untoward movement in the sparring. You never get, like, I have a brother that I can barely spar with, or we couldn't back in the day. It was too intense. Like it always got to a level it never needed to, but it never happens with those two boys. Like, they push each other right to the edge, but they never cross the line. And it's brilliant to see, and it's so good for Jack to have such a high level sparring partner who he has that relationship with.
What was it like sort of going to the event the next day, like that transition between going from Eternal 73 to coaching the next day at UFC 284? Like, that's the first time you would have had to done something like that. I know you've obviously been overseas and everything, but to back it up, like within hours, like what was that experience like for everybody involved in the camp, Jack included?
Yeah, it was pretty mad. You know, like Jack planned on coming to Eternal, but in the end, he just decided to get his head down and get a bit of sleep. So Jack never came, so he got a good night's sleep. But the rest of us were there, and we went through all those emotions on that day. And then, you know, you get home, but it's always pretty tricky to sleep straight after a fight show, I find personally, because there's a lot of things going on in your brain, and you're thinking about a lot of things, and you're coming down off all this adrenaline. So you snatch a few hours sleep, and then give us 1 sec.
All right.
Can you come?
We'll hold the fort while Ben's got to check on the kids. I understand what it's like because I've got dogs. No kids myself personally, but I do have dogs that make an awful lot of noise outside. So I understand that to some degree, that's for sure. Just talking about my dogs, and I get sort of the same treatment. Not quite to the degree you would get with the kids, but I understand. You know, I understand in part what's going on.
Yeah, mate, it's at home. It's always a lottery as to what's going to happen.
You're on a full-time job on top of the other full-time jobs that you got to juggle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's all. You know, as we were talking about, like switching from one to the other, and at home, it's amazing to be home, but you still have all that normal stuff going on as well. So, I mean, my wife is amazing, and she didn't expect much of me that week. But you know, you still have responsibilities and stuff when you're at home, and it's still school runs to do, and kids to drop off at school. So. And, you know, an early mornings, they're not going to give you a lay-in just because you've had a busy night the night before. They don't care. So you got to factor all that in. And then, yeah, it was a big weekend, mate. It really was. It was massive. Well, it was a big week and the lead up to it and stuff. And I was up at 4:30 a.m. on the morning of Eternal to do Jack's weight cut. So to drive to where we were doing the weight cut, get the weight off, get Jack to weigh-ins, get him rehydrated. And then we went back to the ceremonials. Then I came straight to Eternal and then ran straight through from Eternal to the show. Like, obviously I left a little bit early. And then, then we were up pretty early the next day. We had a decent call time, but it was still early-ish. And we all So we all met up about 7 in the morning, Sunday morning, watched a few.
Still the AM, wasn't it? Like Jack still fought in the morning, wasn't it? I think the main card kicked off for 11 Perth time or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jack fought just after midday.
Okay. Oh yeah,
or somewhere around that time. But yeah, it was. But we were up. We were in Jack's for the first. I think we watched Jack Jenkins fight all together, which was great. And then sort of watched a couple of the fights, and then just headed into the hotel and jumped on the bus to the venue. And then it was that whatever that to it. That's just waiting. That's just managing a waiting period, a nervous waiting period. So a lot of sitting around, a lot of small talk, lots of nervous energy, and then boom, off you go.
And Jack Jenkins with the third biggest pop for the Australians. Have to make that amendment. I think I was a little bit in my head there when I made that call. Like I said, when we had that little chat, as soon as I put it out, I was like, someone's going to pull me up on that. I know it, because I realized like a minute after, if no one knows what I'm talking about, I credited Jack with the second biggest pop for the Aussies for the weekend. But clearly that belonged to Jack Della Maddalena out of Perth, obviously the hometown boy there, the scrappy MMA. So we'll amend that here on the show. The pop.
No, I think everybody Aussie got the treatment that night. It was fantastic to see the local crowd get behind the local fighters. And to me, everyone who was an Australian fighter on that card was a local, and the crowd behaved accordingly. I think it was the time of everybody's lives that day. It was pretty special. It was a special sporting event, and it was really nice to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, to have something like 23 fights in like 24 hours, like if you went to both shows, like you certainly got the fix. I mean, that crowd too. I mean, like I've been to events in Melbourne when they've come to Rod Laver Arena and that sort of stuff, but I don't recall anything being as sort of electric as what Perth was, especially if you talk across and the success we had at Eternal 73, just rolling straight into 284 and carrying the momentum. Like it was just like from bell to bell, start to finish, like what a ride. Like, where would you rate that in terms of success? Like if you had to measure that across like how well that could have gone, for both promotions and the way that sort of stacks up together for the country, like how would you rate that?
Yeah, it doesn't get any better than that. And to be honest, like for Perth in particular, I don't know, seven years ago or so, we didn't have a cage. We were fighting against not only, the sport being a bit behind, but the government being so anti-MMA, and in particular the cage, So we've come through all of that stuff. We've all stuck with it as a scene. All the coaches continued, all the gyms continued. Shows Eternal continued. To provide a platform for fighters to fight on, and it's really nice that Perth got that because of the hard work that everybody in Perth MMA has put in over the last 7 years since they took the cage off of us. No one gave up, no one gave up the fight, and we were all learning, and we were all traveling around trying to get cage time. It was really like a crowning moment for Perth MMA. I feel like we showed the world, especially with Jack going out there and doing what he did, that Perth MMA it may be a small little place, but Perth MMA is a force to be reckoned with. And you had Ersteg the night before, dismantling this Japanese dude who is not a bad fighter. He was made to look very ordinary, but he is not a bad fighter. We would not bring over an out and out, can for someone to smash. And Steve didn't want that. Steve wanted the best opponent he could possibly have. He kept asking for better competition, but it was just getting people to say yes. So yeah, to have Jack and Stephen smash it the way they did and just demonstrate the level that where Perth is at, and the rest of the crew on the, your Quill and Sal kills, Olden Bates showing, the last time he was in a stadium, it didn't go well for him, and he strapped his testicles on and he went, I'm going to go right back into that arena, and he's going to have the fight he had and do what he did. And that day, that was incredible. So I think it was a really, really amazing weekend for Perth MMA, and I'm super proud of little old Perth.
Yeah, I mean, what was it, 5 years pretty much to the day, I think it was. We had the entree that was, obviously the card. We had Israel Adesanya debut on. I was there myself for that one. And then to sort of get to this moment, it just sort of took it to another level entirely. And again, to have those events so close together across that 24-hour period. Just with Stephen as well, obviously he had that big announcement, and we talked to him recently and had him on the show. Like, what was that sort of like? I know you said that, obviously you wouldn't sort of just feed him someone and he doesn't want that either. But I mean, maybe you can sort of touch on about sort of, I guess, the state of MMA in Australia in terms of the level he's sort of at and not being able to find an opponent and that being frustrating for him, but also at the same time being a bit of a testament to the level he's, obviously achieved at this point in his career. Like, where are we sort of at? Is it really this hard to find opponents? Like, what's sort of going on out there in terms of getting guys to fight these guys at this level?
I don't know. Like, there are a certain amount of fighters out there that just fight anybody. Give me a name, give me a date, I'll show up and I'll win. And for me, the way that you need to develop fighters as a promoter, your job isn't just to make money, because if it was that, we would have all stopped doing it ages ago. For me, a promoter's job is to develop talent, to make it interesting to the public, to develop storylines, to develop narratives, to develop a competition that people are interested in. Not just like a one-off, 3 times a year we do this one-off thing. It's like there needs to be continuity. And the only way to develop as a fighter and be the best is fight everybody. Fight the best people consistently, and the cream rises to the top, right? Someone's going to win these fights and they're going to keep stepping up the ladder. And you get the best examples, like Casey O'Neill did the majority of her career at Eternal. I think all of her pro fights bar one were on Eternal. And most of her amateur fights. And then Jack Della, the same thing. All of his fights, hard fights, as hard a fights as we could find for him on Eternal, a couple of international fights or an international fight, but bits and pieces. But his career was predominantly fought on Eternal, and he's Rookie of the Year in the UFC last year. Casey was Rookie of the Year in her rookie year. It wouldn't be unsurprising for someone else this year to go on and win it, and the next year with the level of people that we're putting into the UFC. And I don't think it's a fluke. I don't think it's like, oh, look, they just got lucky with Casey and Jack. I think there's a way to make people fight. And I think a lot of people in this country who are near the top and who are near that shout, well, not even from the start, like there's a way to like go, oh, if I just miss that dude, like that's the one guy I probably don't fancy, but if I miss him and then I can get everyone else, I think I can get there. Or if I just jump up here and I get him at this time, and instead of just being, I'm going to fight anyone they put in front of me because I think I'm the best, then I'll beat you. And you can just prove it. Just prove it. Just fight and prove it. That's all I think. If you're a fighter and you believe you deserve to be in the UFC, when you get offered an opponent, as long as it's not like, it's got to make sense, but if they're in your division and they're relevant or they're good, fight them. They should. I don't know what reason would stop you. So that's just where I think it's not quite on point at the moment. I think there's a few people. Well, I think there's loads of people. I think there's very few people who just go boom, 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 whoever you want, smash, next level. But that's the way. There's a few people that are trying to do that, and then sometimes you get beat. And you have to go back to the drawing board. But you're better off finding out at the regional level that you don't quite have it than getting to the UFC and getting badly hurt and embarrassed in front of the whole world. Find out now if this is worth investing all your time and energy into. And you can save everybody a lot of time and effort. So I would just say, I wish people would just fight more. Let's stop talking about fights and let's just make them.
Is there almost sort of that feeling, like, cause it seems sort of funny, like when you hear about, I guess, fighters, they say like, what do you want from your career? And they say, I want to be a world champion. And everyone naturally thinks that's what everyone wants. But I think from my perception, from a lot of other people's perception, that's not always certainly the goal. I mean, maybe that's is that a bit of a byproduct in terms of like, the talent we've got coming up through Australia? And like you said, like it'd be great if everyone just sort of wants to fight everybody, but is it almost sort of a feeling for some people that maybe it's just good enough for them to get to the dance, like to get to the UFC, get a quick sort of paycheck, like say they've sort of been there, and there's the guys that will fight anybody because they think they're good enough to mow through the guys in Australia or their respective countries and get there. There's a sort of disconnect between the guys go, well, I'll pick my opponents and we'll get to the UFC and we'll just sort of see what happens?
Yeah. Look, maybe there's nothing wrong with that either. Maybe if you can do it that way and your goal might be to get to the UFC. If that's your goal, you should do anything you can to achieve it. If your goal is just to get there, do whatever you can to achieve it. Because I think a lot of people can achieve that. For me, it's about what you do when you get there. Like, it's not just about getting there. It's about your body of work in there. Like, it's all well and good being at the table, but you want to be at the head of the table, right? You don't just want to be like occasionally being given a scrap of food. Like, you want to be the guy that they're going, yeah, let's get this guy on cards. You know, let's propel this guy forward. And, you know, the UFC will, if you're a talent or a prospect or they think you're going to be good, they're going to get behind you. They're going to promote you. They're going to get you regular fights. They're going to look after you to a degree, you know? So it's unfair of me. This is just my perspective. Other people have different perspectives, and I fully get that, and I fully appreciate it. But the fortunate thing is Cam shares my perspective, and we run a show. So we get the beauty of running it how we want to run it. And I think that's what people forget sometimes. Like, at the end of the day, we're going to make the decisions we make for our show that we've spent 10, 12 years getting to this stage. So I do fully understand people who don't agree with me. That's cool. Like, if you don't think the way that Cam and I think MMA should be run is good, then we probably shouldn't work together, you know. But if you do agree that we need to have hard fights, we need to test ourselves, and yeah, we're not throwing people to the wolves, you know. It's not like, oh, you've got a glimmer of talent, let's make you face the champ straight away. Like, we understand you need to be put in at the right level and fighting the right people, but you need to be fighting people that are as good as you or better, even if it's just slightly better, you know, and reaching and stretching and to grow and become a better fighter. I think you want to have all your tough battles at the regional level and then go and smash everyone at the world level. That's just my perspective on the sport. So that's just what we try and do at Eternal. That's the way. Well, at least that's what we think we try and do. I don't know what it looks like from the outside, but if anyone was unsure of what we were doing, I guess that's it. That's what we're trying to do anyway. It's hard in this country. It's a massive country geographically to move people around. And there's not a load of fighters. There's not a load of people. The population is relatively small.